Hello, everybody. Welcome into SportsDay Insider presented by the Dallas Morning News. I am Kevin Sherrington, joined by my pals Evan Grant and David Moore. Fellas, I'm here in lovely Fort Worth at the Bowie Hotel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, the lovely wife and I went to the rodeo last night. So it was fun. We had a big time.
How long did you stay on?
We're here one night. We had been in West Texas at some friends in Graham.
Oh, I thought you were actually bull riding. I was asking how long you stayed on the...
I rode a mechanical bull at Gillies one time.
How'd that go?
Didn't go well.
Form, not picture perfect form?
I was on for a while. The problem was I was on the side of the bull for a while. It's not a good look. Not a good look.
You didn't coordinate it with waving your hat in the air, your cowboy hat in the air as you were one arm up?
Well, that was part of the problem, maybe. I don't know. It's off balance because of that. But it's big fun here in Fort Worth. Had a great time. Hope everybody else this weekend was good. David, you got yourself a new football coach.
Yeah, I had a great weekend. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks for mentioning that.
Yeah, you can always tell.
8:43 on Friday night. I'm 15 minutes into season 2, episode 2 of Severance, and
you can always tell what somebody thinks about what they've just done by when they release it. They release it at 8:43 on a Friday night. That tells you we know this was not a good decision. So that's it. If Jerry had really believed in it, he would have released it Sunday morning to try to preempt the conference championship games.
Well, I believe the Cowboys will argue that is when the deal actually finalized. So what did you want them to do? When do you want them to release it? You want them to hold it?
Yeah. Like they care about whether that gets out or not. Come on. That was a little bit of everything there. So let's look at that and talk about what happened there. So Brian Schottenheimer gets the job. We're not surprised by that, but there's a little bit of surprise in it, right, David? It's there was a thought out there that maybe he'd wait for Kellen Mond to see what happened. Not Kellen Mond, Kellen Moore. I just saw a story about Kellen Mond over the weekend. Made me think about old Aggie quarterbacks. About Kellen Moore, but the Eagles are still playing. They're in the Super Bowl, which that has to grate against the Cowboys ownership a little bit there, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. But going into this thing, what would you, before the search even started, what would you have given Brian Schottenheimer's chances?
0.5%. Well, I'm serious. I mean, no, his name wasn't mentioned. I didn't hear his name around the Star at all as a potential candidate. He had, I believe the last time he was up for an interview for a head coaching job was 2010 in Buffalo when he was still the offensive coordinator with the Jets, and he withdrew his name rather than going ahead and taking that interview. So I think the last interview he had was probably around 2007 or so when he interviewed for the New York Jets head coaching job. Rex Ryan got it, and Schottenheimer was the coordinator, and that team did go to back-to-back AFC championships, which is the last time the Jets have had any sort of postseason success. So it's just been such a long time, and this is, people are debating this, and it's like no one else wanted him. He wasn't part of the cycle. And one, I'll say this, the hot coordinator, every hiring cycle there is a hot coordinator or two, and a lot of times people act like, well, if you're the hot coordinator, you're gonna land it as a head coach. I mean, this is the guy you got to get. And go back and let's look at some of the hot hires in certain hiring cycles over the last 10 years and see how many of those coordinators actually went on to become a good head coach. There are different skill sets involved. There's a lot that goes into whether or not a coordinator can make the jump to the head coach. All of that being said, I will say that Schottenheimer, while he certainly hasn't actively pursued a head coaching job over the last 15, 16 years, that doesn't mean he is unqualified to do it just because he wasn't the hot candidate in any cycle. The thing is, you don't know. You're projecting. Any coach that's making the jump from coordinator to head coach, you're projecting that they have the skill set to succeed and manage a much different animal from the top, managing everything versus just one side of the ball. So we'll see. If you want to, you mentioned Kellen Moore. I think if you want to reduce it just down between those two, because the other two candidates that Dallas officially interviewed were both on the defensive side of the ball. And I think the fact they were on the defensive side of the ball worked against them from the start, because I think Jerry was committed to putting the best system or keeping the best system in place for Dak Prescott to go forward, which tilted, his favorites to the offensive side of the ball. I would say Kellen Moore's certainly younger, more creative offensively, has more of a buzz around the league about what he can do. Certainly it's just coming off an NFC Championship game where he presided over an offense that had more rushing touchdowns in the NFC Championship game than the Cowboys had all season. And he's worked in this building before and has a good relationship with Dak. All that was working for him. But Schottenheimer's here now. This offense has been changed and tweaked quite a bit over the last 2 years while Schottenheimer has been here with Mike McCarthy. And Brian Schottenheimer, I think as people saw in that press conference, does have more of a presence, does command a room a little bit more and have more of an overt personality than what Kellen Moore does. And I think Jerry Jones always gravitates towards someone with a little more personality or presence in these positions.
All right. Let me just say, first of all, I don't have a problem so much with Brian Schottenheimer being the coach of the Cowboys because, number one, this is the guy Dak apparently wanted to be the head coach, and he didn't want to have his offense, turned over once again. This is the same thing that Troy Aikman talked about when Chan Gailey got the job. That was his big problem with him, was that they threw out the old offense and it did not fit his skill set, did not fit the skill set of the other players, and that's one of the reasons they went into decline. Although they did make the playoffs under Chan Gailey, and although.
A lot of their players were in decline too. They were on the end of their careers, not the prime of their careers like they were during the Super Bowl run. But yes, that's accurate. Sure.
So to me, the biggest problem I have with it is that you just didn't give yourself a chance. You talked to 4 people formally. You had conversations with Deion Sanders and with Pete Carroll. But you didn't really take this seriously. And I'm not saying you had to go out and interview 17 people like the Bears did. But one of the things that you do by talking to other people is you get an idea of what other organizations are doing. You educate yourself. You find out things. When do you get that kind of opportunity to do that? Why wouldn't you do this just for your own edification? Let's talk to some people and see what's out there. Get some ideas. Let's talk to somebody, and maybe down the line we get an idea. I'd like to hire that guy, maybe as a coordinator. They're just it just smacked of we're so arrogant or we're so incompetent that we don't have to pay attention to what the protocol is or what everybody else is doing.
Both. I mean, that's the thing for me from looking from the outside, right? I don't have an issue like you, Kevin. I don't have an issue with Brian Schottenheimer ending up with the head coaching job of the Dallas Cowboys. But from my perspective, there was no plan going into any of this. And the hiring process was not complete in any way, shape, or form. To your point, right? You didn't probe the intellectual properties of other clubs and see what other winning clubs are doing to the full extent of your knowledge. You interviewed 3 people outside of the building and had 2 casual conversations. And so, it speaks to both incompetence, I think, at the general manager's level and arrogance to the point that we have dealt with for 30 years now, right? That Jerry thinks that he can put anybody in charge of the Dallas Cowboys and they can win.
And again, it comes back to like we talked about before, the split with Jimmy Johnson. What was the infamous comment uttered in the bar in Orlando during the league meetings? There are 500 guys who could coach this team. What did Jerry Jones say after the final regular season loss to Washington when asked if he had a list of candidates in case he decided to move on from Mike McCarthy? He said, look, I'm telling you what, I could go to the Senior Bowl, which starts today in Mobile, which he goes to every January. I can go to the Senior Bowl, and there'll be 500 coaches there lined up trying to get a job. In Jerry's mind, There are 500 coaches who can do this. And that establishes a value, a below market value cost on what he will pay a head coach. You don't hear him say there are 500 pass rushers out here who can do like Micah Parsons could do. That's why he's going to get big money. You don't hear him say there are 500 receivers out here who can do what CeeDee Lamb does. That's why CeeDee Lamb gets paid. Jerry's willing to pay those, but the other side of it, and look, let's just look at the economics on this, because we talked about this before. The hire, really one of the few hires that would have excited this fan base based on when the Cowboys started their search. Let's say that takes Belichick out of it and Vrabel out of it because he already had a job. The one guy that would have excited this fan base and has a track record that intrigues you is Deion Sanders. They would have had to pay $8 million to Colorado just to have the right to pay Deion what, in my belief, would be, he's not going to be top of the NFL market, but you're still looking around $12 million a year for him. So that's $20 million this year just to have the right to have Deion coach your team. Well, I don't know all the numbers, but I'm telling you right now, with what Schottenheimer's going to make this year, his defensive coordinator, offensive coordinator, and special teams coordinator, all of that's going to fit in. He's going to get 4 coaches there who come in less than what Deion would have cost just for one position.
Yeah, and I don't think you can rule that out. I think that's certainly a deal.
That was a factor. That was a big factor, I think. I really do.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, and that's not something else that fans don't want to hear.
No,
you've got the biggest money making machine in the NFL, and you're talking to, and you don't have a salary cap on coaches, right?
No,
you can pay whatever you want for any of that kind of stuff. And if he was really serious about it, if he really was up with the times and what everybody's trying to do, then you would be spending all the money you possibly could to get yourself back to this, to what they used to be.
Especially when Jerry has declared publicly, I would write any check imaginable to get this team another Super Bowl title. Well, now you always have the cap constrains me from doing that because I would do that otherwise. But here's an area where you could do that and you don't.
To that point, right? Infrastructure, intellectual infrastructure. You can invest. There's no cap on what you can spend on intellectual property. And
Correct.
If you're looking for competitive advantages, it's going to be in coaching, general manager, what do we want to call it? Scouting, player development. And the Cowboys don't invest in that. And I think it just goes back to what we're saying without saying it. But this league has passed Jerry Jones by as a football mind. I think this league has passed Jerry Jones by.
Trying to say it's passed Jerry Jones by. Yeah, I think it has too. And that's the issue here for me is that let's look at what the Eagles have done now. So the Eagles are back for the third time in the Super Bowl for the third time in 8 years. Is that right? Something like that.
At least 2 and 4, right? Yeah, you have the rematch at Kansas. You have this rematch game here. Yeah,
yeah, and I don't like their chances against the Chiefs
with vastly different teams and different head coaching staffs.
They certainly are. But I will say this, Howie Roseman, who's been, I've been on record, been my favorite GM in the league now for years. One of the reasons is that he's just exciting with a guy like he's not patient. He's like Dave Dombrowski. He wants to make something happen now. What can we do? He's willing to take chances. Sometimes it hasn't worked out for him, and there have been times in Philadelphia where he's not been a popular figure. But they don't get to these Super Bowls without a GM doing what he's done. They've done it now with how many different coaches? These 3 Super Bowls. Is that with 3 different coaches or 2 different coaches?
2 different coaches, yeah. It'll be yeah. So it's but I mean it's look, they moved on remarkably quickly from Doug Peterson. There aren't too many other franchises that will move on that quickly from a coach who got them a Super Bowl title and then move on. They moved on. Carson Wentz, with all they invested in Carson Wentz, didn't work. They cut the cord and moved on quicker than a lot of teams would. Most teams will just hang on, And look, Dak Prescott's so much better than Carson Wentz. It's not even a discussion. But, I mean, Dak hasn't gotten past the second round. He's the highest paid player in pro football starting March 12th or whatever. They have a first-round pick that they gave up picks for, and then they would just move on. Look what Denver did. They gave up first-round picks for a quarterback. I mean, they gave up those picks for Russell Wilson, didn't work out, got a new coach, move on, and first year they paid for it. This year you started to see some progress, and it may work out there. So other teams have been more decisive in acknowledging their mistakes and moving on from them. And that's what you had early when Jerry and Jimmy were together. Because remember, they had a lot of draft capital. They would use a first-round pick on a guy. But a year later, after seeing him every day, and Jimmy went, yeah, we screwed up on this. We got to move on from this guy. Let's go on, get somebody else in there. And they were willing to move on from – now, again, it was easier. There was no cap. They had a lot of additional draft picks. So it's a little easier to move on in those conditions than what you have today. But – we're going into year 3 here, and people are still saying, well, what's this defensive tackle going to do? How good can he be? Where does he fit in the system? It's going to be he'll be here for 3 years now. Mozzie Smith will be his 3rd season. It'll be his 3rd different defensive coordinator and scheme. So how's he going to fit? And do you know if he's part of this going forward? In year 3, you should know whether your first round pick's there. And if you've determined he's not, move on. I mean, there's no shame in that.
The singular genius of Jimmy Johnson. What blew me away about that was that if you went back to the Herschel Walker trade, Tom Landry was on record saying, "Oh, I would never trade Herschel Walker, ever." And Jimmy looked at that situation and realized that Herschel was a limited running back, kind of a boomer bust type of running back. We can trade him. We can get more players. We need more players. And then he made that deal. And of course, it ended up with all the picks. And as you said, I can remember them cutting a 3rd-round draft choice in his rookie year.
Yeah.
Who cuts a 3rd-round draft choice in his rookie year? Nobody does that. But to me, not only was that Jimmy just admitting we made a mistake here, and I'm confident enough and cocky enough that I don't care what anybody says about it. The guy can't play. The guy can't play. We're going to move on.
But it also sets a baseline, right, of like this is what you have to do to stay here. I don't care if you're a 2nd-round pick or a 3rd-round pick as a rookie. I'll move on. We'll eat the contract because my owner will do it. I'll tell him to do it and keep going. And that is harder to do today, but you still see Philadelphia doing a lot of that and some other teams as well.
You do. And let's look at the Saquon Barkley deal. Now, no one thought that he was going to run for 2,000 yards. That would have been ludicrous to assume that.
Or basically get a 60-yard touchdown run or more on the first carry of every game.
It just seems like it, doesn't it? It's just unbelievable to watch, to have that kind of player. You don't get that kind of production from wide receivers.
No.
Where they're getting 60-yard touchdowns. For a running back to get it is just unbelievable. Now look, he's been hurt a lot in his career. But I will say the Giants are incompetent, and they have never built an offensive line. That has never been a priority with them, and that's why I feel like that Daniel Jones struggled. And in his time, Eli Manning struggled at times because they had such a terrible offensive line, and they just never understood what you have to do to put a roster together and to make it successful. And the Eagles did, and that's part of what you were saying about Kellen Moore. When he was here, he was with the Cowboys. It seemed like they didn't care about the running game, and now he goes there, and then he's part of a team. I think feeling like, look, Jalen Hurts is not going to beat very many people with his arm, but we can beat people by running, and then giving Jalen a little more help in that issue where guys are going to be wide open more often, and he can hit those. And Jalen has really, there hasn't been a whole lot of talk about that. He went from being a couple of years ago an MVP candidate, much like Dak Prescott, to a guy now where he's just kind of a guy. He's just a game manager. He's driving the bus right
There's
now.
Some injuries there, but that was always the question because of his play style. Would he be injured and not be able to, again, when you're earlier, you can take some of those hits, but the accumulative effect as you get a little bit older, you can't avoid all of them. Some of them stay with you longer than others. And I think you're seeing that a little bit with Jalen Hurts. But yeah, I mean, he still, I don't know that a quarterback in a losing effort has had a better game than what he had a few years ago.
Oh, absolutely. So So, we're going to see what happens now with these teams and how they develop. But obviously, Washington has got something going now with a franchise quarterback, in Jaden Daniels. And then you see how the Eagles have restructured. And the Eagles have proven, the Eagles have proven that if Kellen Moore moves on, if other people move on, we'll just replace them. Look at what they did with their roster and how they turned that over. They had, Fletcher Cox and these great defensive linemen. And what are they going to do? They drafted defensive linemen. That's another thing that when the Cowboys have drafted defensive linemen, you mentioned Mozzie Smith, they've done a terrible job of it in the first round. Basically the idea is that no more Michigan defensive linemen. I think it should be the mantra.
And arguably the two best defensive linemen in this draft are Michigan linemen. So
that's true. That's true.
At least one will probably be there when Dallas picks, which is going to be interesting.
That's why I say draft Walter Nolan. If you're going to draft a defensive tackle, take Walter Nolan from Ole Miss. No more Michigan guys. But it is amazing to watch that happen. So I do believe that apparently Howie Roseman feels like, we can find a head coach to do this. The thing is that Howie Roseman is a good enough GM to make this work. The difference between them and the Cowboys is that Jerry Jones is not a good enough GM, and neither is that whole staff. They have, I guess we would like to know is how much of this decision, especially on the head coach, was Steven, how much of it was Jerry. I get the idea that this was more of what Steven and the staff wanted to do, and Jerry just finally went along with it.
I would agree. I think there's always an internal struggle with Jerry over making a splash, doing something that no one expects versus continuity and being, again, it's the whole play it down the middle or get out there and take the risk, I found it interesting in the press conference on Monday. He was talking about, I hear people say I don't take risk anymore. I've taken more risk in these last 5 years than I have my entire career combined. I'm not so sure about that, but
I'm not either.
It comes down to how do you define risk? Now, his argument is, hey, is there a riskier hire than Brian Schottenheimer? I mean, this guy's 51 years old, never been a head coach. So it's just kind of odd to hear him put in the position of, what do you mean a risk? Like, the guy just hired a huge risk. Who else would do this? Is basically what he's saying, right?
Yeah, it is what he's always saying. It is. If nothing else, Jerry has always given us something to talk about, right? I mean, this franchise is never boring. It is just one thing after another that just kind of blows your mind. I've just struggled to keep up with it. What he's going to do next. It always surprises me.
Watch that Netflix series coming out on him, Kevin. He may give you a little insight that you don't know.
Yeah, that'd be good. So let me ask you this. Let's just, before we get out of the Cowboys segment, I always like to talk about the draft at this point. So I do think that with what Saquon Barkley has done this year for the Eagles, and these are very comparable situations where you have quarterbacks. And I don't think anybody would argue that Dak Prescott is certainly a better passing quarterback than Jalen Hurts is. Sure. He's not the package that Jalen Hurts is because he can't run like that anymore. And I don't know that he ever could run like Jalen can run. He's a tremendous, very powerful runner. But he's a compromise package. And I'm going to say that Dak's a compromise package now because they don't want him to run. And if he's not going to run at all, then that's an issue. So to me, what the Eagles were able to do this year because of that, and because of what Saquon Barkley did, because of what Derrick Henry did for the Ravens this year, and certainly there are other examples as well across the league. It's just amazing to me the resurgence of running backs in the NFL after we had just practically written them off.
In 1 year, you flipped the switch, right? And now Dallas once again is in a position of chasing an offensive trend rather than establishing one. And I will say, people say, well, Brian Schottenheimer was under Mike McCarthy. How will this be different? Brian Schottenheimer has been an offensive coordinator in this league for 14 years, called plays in a lot of those spots. Twice his offenses led the league in rushing. That's something Mike McCarthy never did. So you're going to see them run the ball more. He talked about the need to marriage the footwork on your run game to the passing game. So the defense can't get a read on whether you're going to run or pass when you're at the line. He says, that was going to be an emphasis. He talked about, cut splits, motion shifts, and tempo in this offense. And if there, I would say if there was a one consistent valid criticism of Mike McCarthy was he didn't use much motion in his offense to disguise what he was doing or misdirect the defense. His stance was always, I'll use motion if it leads to something, but I don't want motion just for the sake of motion. I think more coordinators in the league today are fine with motion for the sake of motion. I mean, it always had. Look, I understand it always has to serve a purpose or superfluous. I get it, but if you always have motion on a play, I mean that creates some issues for a defense as well. So I think you'll see more motion in Schottenheimer's offense. And you got back, very quickly, on your point on Jalen Hurts and the running. Here's the other thing. Just to reinforce how much of this decision was about Dak and putting him in his sweet spot, this is a quarterback who is now officially the highest paid player in NFL history, in his 30s, coming back off his second major surgery in 3 years. How much do you want to change in the offense? How much, and you don't. You want to get back to what he does best. And one thing, and we talked about this last season, I thought ad nauseum, Dak is at his best, when he has play action. And early last year, because they couldn't run, play action was taken out of his toolbox. And I firmly believe that play action will be a significant, if not the most significant part of the game plan with Dak Prescott going forward with Brian Schottenheimer.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and that's what leads me, to this draft here. When they're drafting at 12, they're going to have some good players available to them, and they're going to have a chance probably to take one of the first or second best offensive tackle, which to me would be a wise thing to do at left tackle. I've been up and down about Ashton Jeanty and whether they should take him or not at 12. We see the damage that's done when you spend for that kind of thing with Zeke Elliott and what that did. But that was a little different.
The damage with Zeke Elliott was the second contract. It wasn't drafting,
Yes.
I know a lot of people were saying, why did you take him at 4? That's too high for a running back in today's game. I don't think it is. The issue comes on the second contract and where that is, especially when you look at the life expectancy of elite running backs in the NFL.
Before we get out, then I want to ask you really quick answer. So I can see them going either way because there's a lot of running backs in this draft. And I've already been on record that I would like them to take Cam Scatterbo at running back in the 3rd round. But if you had the opportunity to take Ashton Jeanty, who is clearly the best running back in this draft and one of the best in the last several years, or a left tackle, one thing fixes, your backfield for sure. But the other thing maybe makes it a lot easier for Dak Prescott to do his job. Both these things are angled toward helping your quarterback. I'm wondering, which do you think helps more, a better play at left tackle or a home run threat at running back?
To me, that is 6 of one and half a dozen of another. I mean, if they're both, if you both have them rated the exact same on your board, I don't think you can go wrong either way. Yeah. Because if you take the tackle and you upgrade yourself there, it's going to make that running back you take in the 3rd round more productive. Yeah. If you don't take the tackle and you take Jeanty and you believe that he is clearly a special talent, and you see where this league is going, he can have more of an impact in year 1 on your one loss total, I would argue, than a left tackle would. So I all things being equal, I don't think you go wrong there. But if they're not equal and you're talking yourself into the other one, I think that's where you can kind of mess up on this.
I have 2 answers there.
Yes, sir.
One, David, where are you more liable? Are you more likely to get an impact left tackle late in the draft, or are you more likely to get an impact running back late in the draft?
That's the other argument. Yeah, much more so a running back. You can get a running back who's going to get you 800 to 1,000 yards potentially in the 4th round.
That would be a tiebreaker for me. The other tiebreaker would be if I was in the room, I'd ask Jerry what his inclination is,
and then the opposite,
and go the
opposite. Yeah,
yeah. There's no question about that. I will say this, and then we're going to wrap this.
I know I've been harsh.
It
just appears that they've just become the laughing stock of the league at this point.
Well, here's the thing: you draft Ashton Jeanty, you've just excited your fan base.
Yes,
for everything you lost in hiring a head coach, you're going to gain in drafting Ashton Jeanty because he's going to be.
And they drafted a left tackle in the first round last year. I think they would be loath to draft another left tackle unless they're convinced they're going to move him to right tackle, and then you just pay Terrence Steele all that money. So what are you going to do with him?
I put him in right guards. What I do if Zach Martin was going to play. So anyway, that's it's all fun. We're going to end up talking about the draft a lot and about free agency when that rolls around here in March, and see what the Cowboys do, see what they can do to mitigate some of the public relations disaster from all of this, which has been going on now for I don't know, 6, 8 months, 9 months, a year. I don't know, maybe longer.
Oh, okay. Put that in air quotes, okay?
Me and Steven, air quotes. All right. So that does it for the Cowboys segment of our podcast.
I used to say that about my dating life. I used to put drought in air quotes too.
Yeah, that was a drought. Gina solved that for you, man.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, that's a drought buster. So let's talk a little bit about the Rangers. Now have they're going to announce a new TV deal in which they have made themselves, once again, Ray Davis will be a billionaire once over when all this is done. Right, Evan?
Yeah, I don't think anybody really cares about the fact that Ray Davis is going to come out financially more secure in all of this. But I think that for the fans, the win-win element of this is that the Rangers are going to be more accessible. And that was something this club had to accomplish in this TV deal. And I think they could have made themselves more accessible if they had gone the MLB production route. Had they gone that way, though, there would have been a significant reduction in the amount of money that they would have seen, and that would have impacted the payroll more substantially. So I think the Rangers, and you hate to give owners credit, but I really feel like the Rangers have taken an approach here and said there's a very narrow channel that we're in right now to try and both widen the audience and try and navigate how TV revenues are changing. And I think that at least in the short term, the Rangers have done a pretty good job here. I think when it's all said and done, they're going to see at least as much money as they did last year from Bally, which was about $92 to $95 million, which was about $15 million less than they had contracted for. And I think there's some optimism that they could do better than that, which is going to lead me, I know, to your next question, Kevin.
So what are they going to do with all that money?
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do a whole lot with it this year. I do think that the feeling this year is they've been over the threshold twice. They don't want to pay 50% in taxes this year. They'd rather reset and get to a point where they can go substantially over next year when the payroll cap or the threshold for the CBT is 244. And anything in the first 20 million above that would only be taxed at 20%. So I think they feel like they've got a good team, but next year they can go out and if they need to hit some home runs, they can do that again now that they've got some cost certainty on the TV deal. And let me just give you one example, Kevin. And some of this is from stuff that I've read. Here's the difference. The San Diego Padres were making nowhere near what the Rangers were making or had contracted in TV revenue. But the Padres went the MLB route because they lost Bally, which is now FanDuel, which is all a subsidiary of Diamond. Padres were contracted to get $47 million. They got $17 million last year. That's hard to replace. And now you look at the financial issues that the Seidler family is dealing with out there, and this is a real sea change for professional baseball. The upheaval in the TV deals is, I think that in the short term, it's important to try and recoup as much of that money and be a little bit sensible in how you spend going forward. The Rangers are going to probably have a little bit lower payroll than they did last year when they had a franchise record $263 million CBT, but they're still going to be in the top 10, and I think they're going to be positioned next year better off to go and take advantage of some other free agency deals.
Now, let me ask you this, because this has been interesting to me too. The Rangers or have a 5-state region in their broadcast network. Is that correct?
Yeah, they've got all of Texas, all of Louisiana, all of Oklahoma, all of Arkansas, and I believe it's like the eastern portion of New Mexico. But their households, according to Neil Liebman last year at a Sports Business Journal conference, their households that they've got in their 5-state area is 16.5 million. And last year, because of the lack of a separate streaming element and because of the limitations of Valley, their penetration was only about 2 million households.
Yeah, so that will obviously make a huge difference in what they can generate in advertising revenue, in everything, right?
All of which will come in-house now, too. So the execution is going to be on the Rangers, or the onus to execute is going to be on them. But I think there is opportunity for them to do really well financially.
So now Neil Liebman is in charge of all of that.
Neil Liebman is going to be in charge of this new entertainment division, which oversees Rev, the Rangers entertainment division, which does all the concerts and all the events out there. And that has been a hugely successful moneymaker, because what they built out there was, a multi-purpose event center, right? And they're running almost as many events, if not more, outside of the baseball season than Jerry is in AT&T Stadium. And the other element is going to be this Rangers media element that will oversee television, radio, the emerging streaming market, and all of that will be done in-house. So Neil will be over those two elements, and Jim Cochran, who was the executive vice president, kind of the chief moneymaker last year. He was chief revenue officer. He'll be in more of a high profile role as the executive vice president for business, and I believe he's going to be chief operating officer.
So just look at the franchise, the local franchises. Obviously, the Cowboys are the biggest moneymaker and always will be. There's nothing that will change that. But it seems to me that we've seen a slide here on the Mavericks front from what we thought all along was this really advanced type organization, which was really kind of under Mark Cuban was kind of a mom and pop deal, because it was a pop deal. He was just running it all himself. There was no mom involved. And to where there's an organization now where there are positions that have been all delineated, and this is what people do, and now the Rangers have really moved into that realm as well. They seem to have more people in charge of more divisions that are, as you said, to make more money.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the revenue streams are still potentially there. They're just changing, and how you approach them changes. And I think what the Rangers did, with Rev was really, again, nobody wants to know how much money Ray Davis and Neil Liebman are lining their pockets with. But I think in terms of creating revenue streams that they didn't have to share with other franchises, it was a stroke of genius. And I think they feel like this has the opportunity to navigate this period of time where we've still got a significant number of people on cable, but more and more people are migrating to streaming, and to kind of navigate that period until at the other end we get majority of people who are paying directly for a streaming service.
So let's go back to the thing that you wrote last week about the $100 you'd have to pay per season for the streaming. But now that it's going to be available on DirecTV and what else did you have that was going to be available on?
I think they were looking at DirecTV, Spectrum, AT&T Uverse, and they were also working on some other deals for other cable companies. The bottom line here is I think that with the streaming element and the cable deals that they'll have, plus this like 15-game over-the-air package that will be accessible to everybody, and I expect that will be accessible in just about every market in the 5-state area through some local channels. With all of that, they expect that they'll be able to have penetration to close to 100% of the households. Now, whether people want to take advantage of that or not remains to be seen. But here's the way the 3 tiers work, right? You don't have any cable whatsoever. You want to watch an occasional Ranger game, you'll be able to watch what amounts to a Friday night game on your local channel. You have cable. As long as you've got the bundle that includes whatever the regional sports network, which will include Ranger Sports Network, you have that. You'll have access to Ranger games through that, just as you did when you had Bally on whatever cable system you have. You don't have any of that. Your cable system doesn't carry that by some chance, and you're in the market, or you're a complete cord cutter. You can sign up for Victory Plus at $100 for the season. I think, the Rangers will let you know that costs about 60 cents a game, but it's still $100 a season. But you'll have access, and that was the big problem last year, is that there were plenty of people who were willing to pay for a streaming app, but if they didn't already have Bally as a provider, they couldn't get the app. The app was pretty much useless in that regard. So this really expands their ability to reach people. Now, whether or not they can get people to sign up is one thing, but I do think that what we need to emphasize is, for a lot of people who weren't paying anything for Rangers games last year and were able to watch it, unless their cable bill goes up because DirecTV or whoever passes on a carriage fee, which they've always done with other situations, they'll still be able to get the Rangers on their cable system. They're not going to have to write a separate check for that.
See, that's all fascinating to me, because I'd like to know what's the penetration for the Astros. If the Rangers are looking at a market of potentially 16 million, what is the Astros? I would think it would not be as good, just simply because of the location, right?
The Astros don't have as big a broadcast territory as the Rangers do. Yeah.
Yeah. So to me, this is, besides the advertising revenue, it's a potential of building a fan base. You're talking about, people growing up and buying the apparel, going to games now, being interested. We saw what happened with WGN and what happened in Atlanta, what happened in Chicago, and these franchises before with the superstations, and that's why Eddie Gaylord didn't get to own the Rangers, was because of that, because of the fears.
There is opportunity, Kevin. There's opportunity here. I still think it comes down to execution, and I will also say that anything regarding broadcasting is over my skis. Really, anything involving anything is over my skis. But the broadcasting environment right now is more volatile than it's been in a while. And, teams were real happy to get these rights fees and have guaranteed money and not have to put anything into production. Now it's going to take some more effort. So I think there's still some unpredictability there, but I do think there is an opportunity for the Rangers to be in that realm of the top 5 or 6 type moneymakers in Major League Baseball.
Well, and that's what it's going to take, outside of having Mark Walter owning your team and having unlimited resources. That's what it's going to take, and that's why fans should be excited about this, not only because they would have access to these games and the broadcast, but also because the more money they make, the more money they should be spending. And certainly on our standpoint, from the media standpoint, we won't want to hear Ray Davis say, well, we can't afford that.
Right.
Because we know how much money you're making, Ray, off all of this. And so we're going to pound on you about that. And the fans are going to pound on you about it. There won't be any excuses. And that's the difference, too. And obviously, Ray Davis was already the best owner the Rangers have ever had. And because he has spent more money, it has always been a franchise that was lagged behind the rest of baseball, even though it should have been much better because of the TV market, just simply because the owner didn't have enough money.
Well, and I think, one thing we always saw, and really in a lot of ways over Ray's first 10 years here, Rangers owners have always kind of gone with the flow. They've never been willing to take a chance and say, hey, how can we go a little bit outside the box here? And whether or not this is the right long-term play, nobody in our industry or even the broadcast industry can properly predict. But they are taking a chance, right? They are going out there and trying to create an opportunity where they can make more money. They're not just saying, well, we'll just take what MLB provides and we'll acquiesce to that.
Oh, no question about it. And plus, too, this accounts for both sides of it. You're able to straddle this, right? The streaming market, which, of course, everybody keeps telling us that one of these days, kids don't like to watch. Why anyone would want to watch a football or a baseball game on their phone is just beyond me. It is like, if I have to, then I will. I just
You're
don't
so
want to.
old.
I
Oh
am
my
so old.
gosh.
But, we're buying televisions that are the size of,
Hey,
of
look at that
small
cloud
houses.
in the air. Let me rail my fist at it. Jeez.
Well, I'm doing that too. But why are we buying 60-inch televisions if we don't want to watch games on them? What's the point?
That part of it always confuses me. The one thing about about your mobile phone is I hope you're not watching your mobile phone at home unless it's kind of like your PIP type option. I mean, I want to be able to see what's going on the field. So if you're out and about, if you're in a restaurant, you can't see something and you have to be connected to the game, it's an option. But my God, I want to watch the game in as bright a color and as big an image as I possibly can at home.
Well, that was the whole point of it. I never forget when we first got what was a gel TV or whatever it was that we called, and I watched it and I thought, my gosh, I feel like I'm sitting at the game right now watching it. It was just a miracle. I mean, it was that. You're right. That was the whole point of it. Like watching hockey. Before we had what we have now, it was, what the heck was that? Where's the puck? I can't even see it. What's going on? Well, now you can see all that. You can't see it on your phone. That's just me. That's just me yelling at clouds. All right, that's going to do it for the Rangers segment of our podcast. We're going to move over and talk a little bit about the Mavericks. Shock of all shocks, somebody else got hurt, David. Maxi Kleba's out now with a stress fracture in his foot or ankle or somewhere. I frankly, I get them all mixed up with all the stress fractures and all the breaking going on.
I think Kleber was his foot. I think it was his foot.
On Kleber, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like one thing after another with this team. So, nobody's going to feel sorry for you when you have injuries. That's just what happens, and you just have to put up with it. But I will say, David, that the trade deadline's coming up pretty soon. This was a pretty complete roster that the Mavericks had going into the season. Certainly their most complete roster, and maybe since when they won the title, I don't know. And we didn't even know that was a complete one going into that season.
Oh, I think you could argue it is. I mean, at least based on the skill sets you have in place, the age of the players, the production. This is, I think you're very safe arguing this is as good of a roster from top to bottom as the Mavericks have ever had.
So, with that being said, they probably could use a little more defense out on the wing. But they have gotten really good play from people this year. I've always said the one thing about having these guys getting hurt is that it forces these other guys into roles which they haven't had to do before, and you get to see how they grow. What happens to P.J. Washington when he is forced to carry an offensive load? He is obviously. I think maybe of all the acquisitions that Nico Harrison has made, certainly Klay Thompson was great, and Daniel Gafford was great, and drafting Derek Lively and trading for that pick, trading down, getting the 12th pick and taking him. Those are all significant roles. Derek Lively's the third most important player on this team, no question about that. But to see something in P.J. Washington, and who'd been a nice player, but nothing special.
You can argue P.J. Washington pulls it all together. He makes those other moves even better and kind of gives you that new. There's on really good teams, to me, there's always the third or fourth best player on the roster is, yes, he's down in the pecking order, but based on what his skill set is, he's the fulcrum that makes the whole thing better. And I think you see that with P.J. Washington. Now, the issue they've had here with all the injuries is, and I agree with you completely, it's good to have guys. You have to lean on your bench more during the course of the regular season because they should be better prepared, or at least you have a better read on what they can do in the postseason for you to play some meaningful minutes. All of that being said, when you have as many injuries as the Mavericks have had, I think there's a little concern that you're pushing players out of what their role is going to be, and it minimizes, what they can do for you when it gets back. Again, they're going to have to start playing some guys at center that are not going to play at center in the postseason. What good does that do you? And does playing that get you out of, perfecting the role that you were in going into the postseason to be at the best for the team. So there's always a fine line there. And I think the Mavericks are in danger now with just so many injuries that they're just going to, they're just going to have to put bodies at center. Here's the other thing. I think Gafford's outstanding. We talk about Lively. Gafford's really good too. But I don't know that you want to be playing him 30 to 35 minutes at this stage of the season and expect him to do what he did in the postseason last year again. You've got to manage his minutes. And, who on this team are you going to play at center now? Are you going to run Omax in there some? Or are you going to –
Well, I think that's one of the things in my mind that was a weakness. To think at this stage of his career, Maxi Kleber just can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And he's not – He's also a very nice player for what he does. The fans don't like him. He's going to have to hit a three for you occasionally to be effective. He hasn't been, consistent at that. And he's not, he's good at directing the defense. He's not good in one-on-one defense anymore. So those are the issues with him. To me, more than a defensive wing, I think they need that third center. I think they need to get a guy, a different kind of center. The two guys that they have there now are both, they're not going to go out and drift out and make a three for you. That's not what they do.
The issue is, what do you give up to get that?
Well, it is.
And how is that going to impact you in the postseason when the third center is not going to play?
Yeah, I know. That's the thing is, the third and fourth guys are Maxey and Dwight Powell, and you certainly don't want to do that. To me, when you watch the Mavericks without either Lively or Gafford in the defense, it's just it's like a parade down the main street. It's just terrible to watch. It reminds you of what it was like. It shows you how important Derek Lively is. As good as Gafford is defensively, Lively is an otherworldly defender. Yeah. I would never have thought he would have been as effective as he is, especially
this early in his career. Yeah, they're a great combo.
Yeah, it is a great combo, and who saw that coming? That you're going to take these two centers.
Not to this level, man.
And what everybody tells you what makes it in the NBA now as far as what you want from a center and to be able to make this work. And I think some of it obviously is because of the kind of point guard you have. And then with the other guy who's also plays a point in what he does. They're just that kind of they have that kind of chemistry. Nico Harrison has made himself into, I don't know, is if he's not the best GM in the market, he's the second best.
He's in the conversation.
Yes, he is.
So around the league is one of the top guys too, I think.
Yeah, that's not what I saw coming at all. When he was introduced as a GM, and I've talked about this before, I just thought, oh, this guy is in over his head. He just seems like too nice of a guy to do this. And I'm not sure if he understands the gravity of it. He clearly does. And I think probably a lot of that is the fact that he was a player and was a pretty good player. And he understands basketball. He has good relationships with people around the league and with the players. If we look at what's happened with Kyrie Irving and how happy he's been here, I give Jason Kidd a lot of the credit for that, but I give more credit to Nico Harrison for building that culture with the rosters that he has, and also with the relationship that he's had with Kyrie for a long time. I think those are huge factors in what's made that a success.
So, Kevin, you just want a team full of centers. Is that what I'm gathering from this?
Well, I just need one more, Edmund. That's all I need. You got Kleba and Dwight Powell are supposed to be centers as well, and neither one are good enough defense. Dwight basically can't do anything.
I think you just want a team of giants.
Well, that's what basketball is all about, right? One of those little guys. That's not good. They tried that before, remember? They tried to build a team around, basically it was a donut, no center, just make it happen. That's the thing about the Maverick centers. Remember when they were so bad? Remember all those years? If we were going to rank the centers all time,
Bill Winnington, Uwe Blob,
oh my gosh,
that combo probably pales in comparison to Lively and Gafford.
Well, exactly. That's the thing. Lively and Gafford probably rank in the top 5, both of them, in all-time Maverick centers. I don't know that there's that many more because I'm not counting. Obviously, you're not counting Dirk as a center. He's a forward. I don't know who else we would run that conversation. If Roy Tarpley, if you're counting him as a center or as a power forward, I don't know. Probably a power forward, really. So they've had some Hall of Fame level power forwards, point guards, off guards.
Tyson Chandler because of their success and James Donaldson. But yeah,
sure,
I mean,
those two.
Again, that tells you a lot. Yeah, 2 of their top 5 centers are
on the roster
right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and they're that kind of centers. They were the kind of centers that would have worked back then too. That's the amazing thing about them is that as the league has evolved, the Mavericks have found a way to make those kinds of centers work now. And when everybody else thinks, oh no, you have to have a guy, that drifts out, the way they've been able to make this team work and the roster work, that has not hurt them like everybody assumed it would, by bringing in those kinds of players. So they've done a terrific job.
40 plus years as a franchise, they hit on the formula at center. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they needed to warm up a little bit. Some trial and error there.
Get your feet on the ground, see what works, see what doesn't.
That's what Jerry's working on. Since all that success, he's in his trial and error phase, and it's more error, just a trial for us, error for him. All right, that's going to do it for our podcast this week. We thank you for listening in. We said that maybe we'd have a Cowboys coach for this one, and we did. So we'll see what happens next week. I don't know. We didn't talk about potential for coordinators, and maybe they'll have a little bit more of that lined up for next time. So from everybody in here to everybody out there, thanks, and we'll see you next time.